Speak guys, welcome to another class here on the YouTube channel, and the content today I'm going to talk about point-to-site VPN with MFA authentication with multi-factor authentication. More and more people need remote jobs to be able to connect in your environment regardless of where you are, whether within your local network or from your house, whether from a coffee shop. And we as administrators, as architects, as engineers, we need to guarantee that this access be done in a secure manner. So today I'm going to bring you one form. Actually, I'm going to show you two forms. Enable MFA for when your user needs. We had a boom there in the last few years on the back of remote work. That's great, right? It demystified a bit. After that, the culture changed, but it brought a very worrying burden from the point of view of security. Many companies have had problems with infections with any type of invasion through of VPN clients. This can be generated by a number of factors, and the basic principle so that we can guarantee this is that you enable MFA during the attempt and your user's access through a remote connection. So that's point number one. By doing this, you already guarantee a basic layer of protection. There are N formats protection, more authentication via MFA will guarantee that you have security there bigger. So go to the portal so that we can work on this content now. Technical, I'm talking here about VPN sites, or better point on the site. We have the VPN website site. That is the VPN that you are going to use to connect two data centers. Two locations, right? Your data center, one prime with the Microsoft data center. Then when you need to connect your user, I'm here with my notebook and I need connecting in the Azure environment is one of the easiest and safest ways for us to connect. It is the use of VPN point on the site. When I say connect to the Angel, it is not simply open the right portal, guys. The portal has to have MFA enabled since the principle mainly for users who have administrative privileges. But the thing is that I'm talking about you connecting a machine to access some type of service that use private IP, for example. So you need to be inside the environment of the Azure. An example, I configured private access for my store account if I'm not logging in. After that, from a private connection, there are several items that I will not be able to get. Access through Portal do Angel. Then I would have to connect from a machine that if it was inside a network, that an internal network is established, principally for the virtual machine, right? Virtual machine, we in the laboratory usually enter public IP. But on a daily basis, we cannot add public IP. So if you're not in the office to use a VPN site on the site, the alternatives, it's usually you have an Azure Bastion or a VPN point from the site. Here in this drawing, it shows the configuration of a VPN, both the site of the site and the point of the site. The basic requirement for this is that we have an Azure Virtual Network Gateway, which it will basically serve as the external connection point. On Ezio's side, that same virtual network gateway, it will be useful both for you to connect to VPN sites and sites point site. Then you can have both connection formats simultaneously. Exactly. How was it showing here in the cartoon? And from that, when we are going to connect. One, VPN point from the site. We need to select the type of protocol we are going to authenticate is, for example, you can use via an Ezio certificate you can use. I saw the question here with enter through authentication. So here we have some formats via certificate. Here we have via Entra Id or old AD, and here via Radiance. Which one do I recommend today? Okay, I would recommend you to use it for safety. Radio entrance can also provide very good security, but via certificate. But we can't have the level of security that we want. The certificate may at times bring some security breaches, not from the point of view that that certificate is not secure, but you have a difficulty to expire and access. Collaborator has already left the environment, and since he is connecting via certificate, it can be that it continues to access it for a certain time because it needs to expire that type of access. So my recommendation is that you use OpenVPN together with authentication. Do come in then. I have a Primes environment. I use the Enter Connect to replicate users to mine. Go to the cloud, and then I can get all those users, create groups, and grant or not access to my VPN point site. And besides that, I can enable MFA, so everyone's first step will establish a VPN connection. Then I will configure the requirements on the side of the Ego. Then we go into each of these details. So for this live, I will create a new resource group that I'm going to call here resource group RG Trazzo live. I'm going to leave this there in the region. If I advance here in a tag, I'm going to add a tag of send of environment, and here I'm going to use live VPN, for example. Okay, so I'm going to put one tag here to classify that these resources are my resources used for this structure that I need. I need a network structure. I need of a VNet, simply a virtual network. And inside we will have some requirements important. So I'm going to create a new VNet. I'm going to call it VNet Live 2. I'm going to select my live resource group here and here. Then it brings live 01, the region where it's my resource group. And this is it here. I'm not going to enable any of these items in the part from IP address. I'm not going to touch anything. I'm going to leave him because the objective here is not, let's work with this part of, I'll let it, that he creates a Bennett 10.0.0.0 bar 16 is dress space, and that it creates a subnet like addressing full there 10.0.0 bar 24 here. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to add my environment tag, and here I'm going to select live VPN, and I'm going to order so that he can do the review and for him to create. When we are going to close a VPN, regardless of the VPN format we are going to work with, whether websites or point website, we have some requirements, and one of the requirements basic is that we must have a gateway subnet, right? What it is, this is where our virtual network gateway will be instantiated. The virtual network gateway, it will generally consist of two instances, regardless of whether you are going to be working as active asset or active standby. So it needs to deliver private IPs for these instances. Then we need to delimit an exclusive portion of our network for it to host the service. Then we come here in virtual network, select the virtual network that I just created, and here in subnets. We have the gateway from the subnet, so it already comes exclusively this little button here so that we can create this subnet gateway. There are some services within Edge that they require an exclusive subnet. What does that mean? It's a subnet that you're not going to add. No other resource, for example, on this subnet gateway. I'm not going to create a machine virtual and put it there. I may have, for example, the need to create a lighthouse I need. Having a subnet with exactly the name is Joe Fire or subnet, I want to create a Bastion is Joe Bastion subnet. So they are unique subnets for each application resource gateway. For example, I need to deliver an exclusive subnet to him. It doesn't have to have a specific name, but it doesn't allow me to have other resources connected. So here on our subnet gateway, it will suggest us here an address followed by the 0 address space that I have on my VerNet. And this may be an exam question. Okay, what 0 range is requested? This range for you to work with the VPN, it can to be a bar 26. Microsoft's recommendation is a bar 26 because then it reduces a little the amount of available for you to take advantage of in a bit. This network will break. This network, right? We can set bar 24 because there won't be any kind of problem. But if you like to work with well-defined networks closed at the service level, what do you need to deliver? A bar 26 will be what Microsoft recommends in sizes ideals, and then we will create this subnet that will be the gateway used by our virtual network gate. So she's already created agora. Now we can start creating. I can search here for virtual VNG network gateway. So here I have a virtual one. Network gateway created. I'm going to create an exclusive one now for our live the name. I'm going to call it VNG trait. Live form the region. This is okay. I'm going to put it in the region where I I'm working what type of gateway will be a gateway for a VPN or for Express Out, right? Express Out the direct connection with Microsoft for you to work via fiber optics. In our case, it's not a VPN. If you say it's a VPN, it's the same for a VPN site or point site SKU, 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 SKU. It is important, guys, because SKU, this link that I left here will greatly change your price and the capacity of your VPN for you running down here. It has all the features of SKU Basic. What is the first SKU that we have here? Because it is the cheapest SKU, it is no longer more available for you to use via the portal. So if I search here for a base, you notice that it doesn't show up, only via PowerShell. But he has some points here that are important. For example, ESCOR Basic. It supports me to work VPNs, point-to-site with OpenVPN. It's not supported. This means that I will not be able to get my user to log in by authenticating with an Android user, both native and synchronized from the environment, a prime environment hybrid. I would have to connect with the certificate, for example. So that's not good. Then I recommend for a productive environment that you do not use this basic. So the ideal is that you start with VPN GW1, which does support 250 VPN point and site connections simultaneously. So you can have 250 users connected, Rafa, to my company. There are 500 users out there. You have to start looking at these other options that we have it here. Of course, the greater the characteristics, for example, number of connections, simultaneously you're put in and you will have the redundancy zone. As soon as plus you expand this range, the more will be the amount of value, the cost that you will pay. That's why here we also have the option. When I talk about the base, that it's okay, guys. Does it mean that you can't use VPN point site? Means you don't have a means. More secure authentication, does it have the option here for me, for example, to use SSTP, which is a protocol that is already quite alleged and that I do not recommend that you use. I recommend that you work with OpenVPN for this type of authentication. Right then, here on for our VPN, I'm going to use VPN GW1, which is the cheapest, this part of the virtual network here, guys. It's along with other resources. I'm going to list two, for example, the ASG, right? When we configure secret groups to release within an MSG, for example, allocation secret group, and also the LNG local network. Gateway. When we are going to close a VPN site are two resources with the virtual network gateway because they have a delay too long to appear on Azure. So if you create it just like I did there, our virtual network, and it doesn't list, wait about 15-20 minutes to refresh the screen because it's taking a long time to appear. I'm going to put a name here. I'm going to call it a VNG trade 2. I'm going to put it here, or rather 2 for Point-to-Site. I'm going to select my VNet since it's already listed here, the subnet. It will ask if I want to create a public IP. Yes, I will create a public IP that I'm going to call it a PIP of public IP VPN Point-to-Site. Here it asks if I want to work in active mode. No, right? Active. If I were to have two connections with my local environment working with BGP, then I could use an active format 2 links so that I have redundancy. In my case, I'm not even closing the connection. Site. So I'm going to use it the way it goes. Work with one instance of the virtual network, gateway active, and the other on standby. And here I'm going to move on to the tag part, and here I'm going to select on NLive VPN. Now, he will do the personal validation, the deployment of the virtual network gateway. It took a long time to ask him to create it here. It can take between 20 and 30 minutes. So I will stop the video here now as soon as it completes the return, and I'll show you how much. It took him a while to deploy this. Guys, finished deploying virtual here. Network gateway, show you how long it took its first public step. It's seconds now. It took 21 minutes to deploy the gateway. So how did I say enter? In 20 and 30 minutes, I will click here on go to resource, and we will open our gateway from VPN to VPN gateway. It can have the default settings where we would close the connection via connection from the virtual network gateway to the local network gateway to a VPN site to site. And for the point of site, we would use this guide here point from the site configuration. So here we are going to click to configure now. It will ask us for an address pool. What is this address pool? Is the address I want granted to my users. For example, I have my internal addresses configured in VNets and subnets. And here I provide an IP range at which my users connect to the VPN. They will receive this type of address. It has to be a different address than it uses. And it serves precisely so that you can work on the differentiation of this user understand which network the client is connecting to. I will use here 172.16.0. 0.24, remembering that internal non-routable addresses. And here's the kind of protocol, okay? As I had shown you here, the protocols that we can work on. I recommend using an OpenVPN, if possible, not to use SST. IKv2 is already a slightly more secure protocol, okay? I'm going to use OpenVPN because it's the protocol that allows us to work with authentication integrated with Android user. That is the user you have an Android password or synchronized with your domain a prime. It will work here. So I will select that I want to work with Azure Active Directory, right? It puts it here as Active Directory, but in fact, it's already the one that comes in when we enable authentication via Entra Id. Or Azure Active Directory, it will ask us for 3 elements: tenant, audience, and issuer. I put here for you in the video description what these 3 elements are, right? For example, in the first one, the lieutenant needs it. Ask me to fill in this format. Notice that he gives me an example below. Then I have to fill in with login.microsoftonline.com, my lieutenant go, and close the bar. The bar at the end is important. Always, it's the app, the ID of the VPN app. So it's the same for everyone else. You who is going to reproduce this laboratory must enter the same audience as I am. Leaving here in the video description and the axis, it will be the address sts.windows.net, the lieutenant again, and the bar closing. Then I'm going to open a second tab. Here in mine comes in out of, so I can get my lieutenant's 0 here in mine on my portal without me leaving that screen here. So I come here on, and here I'm going to copy mine and IG. Now I'm going to adjust it here on my screen. I'm just going to change mine here, IG. And then I can copy and paste those same elements here. So I copied it. I'm going to paste it here on, I'm going to get against, I'm going to paste it here. And here I'm going to take the one and I'm going to paste it here. Now, an extremely important point. If the first time you're setting up a point-to-site VPN, you have to grant the consent of the administrator for him to open the application, for him to register the VPN app. I'm going to use my second tab here inside the login, and I have an enterprise application. And here I have a VPN app, right? So if the app didn't show up, you need to register. The app here, 41B23, he's my audience. So for you to give grant, you do it once. You must log in with a native domain user with the global administrator privilege. My account that I'm logged into here is an Outlook account. It wouldn't work. I'm going to use the second tab here again. I would have to get a native account, which is from my domain, though not an external account. My account is an Outlook account. It's here as an external account. Microsoft account. I would have to take one of those users who are native to my domain and give them the privilege from global administrator for him to click here. I'm going to click mine. I already have consent. The app now appears just to show it to you. He's going to ask you to read some information relating to your lieutenant, right? Maybe mine doesn't even work here. Don't do anything at all because I already have it. Registered, in other words, it just looped there and finished, but this is extremely important. For you down here, we have an additional rounds to one. What is that? These here are fixed routes that you can place for your VPN client. So if you have to arrive at some route and it just so happens that it's not natively in this wind, where do I have the virtual network gateway? It will load several automatic routes. For example, if I have peeling connections with others, it will already bring this. But if you have any customized routes that you need your VPN client to be able to arrive, you can add the locations here, the required IP range. Here, okay, done. So we are going to click here on save, and now it will take a few minutes to, can it save this setting? As soon as it saves, it will enable it for me. The download of the VPN client will only take a few minutes, okay, guys? So I will wait here and we'll be back. Hello, everyone. Finished. Save it here from my client. It will not enable automatically. Take care here for the notification it will bring. Okay, so he ended up here a minute ago informing me that the configuration that I did it on the virtual network gateway. Okay, when the notification appears, you can simply change the tab here and go back, and it will enable the client to download a VPN. So now I'm going to download this client, or rather, this is not the client, which is the configuration that you are going to import into the client. Where we download the client for Windows, we will download it from Windows Store. Then you can type Windows there, store it in your search menu, and it will bring here the Windows Store. You will search here for it is Jew VPN. Hi, and he's going. Bring you this VPN client here, the Angels VPN client. I already have the client if VPN is installed. So I'm going to click here on open. You just go there and ask for it to open for you so that it installs for you. It will take a few seconds. It's super easy. I'm going to get my download that he just made here for my client. What in my downloads folder, and I'm going to extract the folder from my clients. So leave, I ask him to extract it here. Okay, now the path is here, and now I'm going to come here. On the screen, click on this plus symbol and ask it to import to give an amount here. In my configuration, the dot for the path of my folder, it will bring two folders. Edge or VPN is generic. I'll go to Edge the VPN here config, and ask it to open. First, it will generally take the name of the connection, your virtual network. I'm going to put here VPN trait. It's due trait live, because sometimes we can have several VPN clients depending on the clients that we are answering. It will generate a reliable certificate for your connection here. And it says that it will connect authenticating through Azure Active Directory, right? Updated in G. And here the information that we provided in the client configuration, I will click in save. And now I'm going to ask him to connect. Super important, you need to have it there on the Azure portal. I'm going to come here and I'm going to say, okay, here, you need to have users configured so that we can log in. So for example, here I have some users that were synchronized, others no. I'm just going to test with this user of mine here, Raphael, that he's a cloud user, that it didn't come from the on-prem sync. If his suffix here, the user's FQDN, is Raphael Parte, cloud.com. So I'm going to use it as a first test. The VPN has some peculiarities, okay? From time to time, depending on how your scenario is going, it may give a connection error. If you have any Fire configured, if you have other VPN software configured, then you have to be careful about the settings in general. I had the one as a rule. If you don't have any of this, it usually works. Okay, so I'll ask it to connect. And he's going to ask me for authentication. He showed up here for me that account already counts that I want to test. But if it doesn't appear to you, you will click here on an account, corporate or student. Continue, and then on the authentication screen, you will pass your username. Okay, so I'm passing in my username here, Raphael, and he's doing the authentication for me by default. This user of mine, you can see that he didn't request the MFA. Okay, why didn't he ask for the MFA? Or today, how do we work with the option, for example, of security default tenant in? At some point, he can ask for the MFA, and for our account, we will have two forms to configure this MFA. This here is the standard root of my VNet, 10.0.016, and this here is the IP range that I asked him to assign to my machine. So here on my machine, let me open a prompt here, open a CMD right here. And here I'm going to type ipconfig spacebar. Here on my machine, there will be several network cards, right? Because I have countless settings, but I'm going to look for the interface that it will have Azure here. Oh, guys, here's the Azure interface adapter that it creates. Then here he is. Oh, so here it is, well, Jay, and here it is my IP address he created. You can see that it's within that range that I had experienced, 172.16, and he got 02. On every route you had your net. Where is your virtual network gate? Do you have peeling? It will connect. If you need to put that additional route there in the client, you can connect. So there are a number of factors that we can work on over here for us to test that this VPN actually closed and connected. I'm going to create a machine, a simple machine, just for us to do a connection test. I will create a machine with no public IP. So I'm going to select Research Group Live. I'm going to put, here comes a live trace. I'm not going to use another availability. I'm going to leave the security standard, and here I'm going to use a Windows Server 2022, okay? Any version you have just for us to do a connectivity test. I'm going to let him use size P2S, put a user here, the administrator, the password, hi, okay? I'm going to move forward. You can leave door 3, 3, 8, 9. I'll leave it with the premium disk. You can reduce the disk there to have a significant lower cost. Okay, guys, it has to be on the internet because we created net live by Fogo, and here on public, the team will exchange this information. I will not let him create a public IP. I want a machine without public IP, so I'm going to give it a name. I'll leave the network security group as a base and releasing port 3389. I'm going to move forward. I'm not going to change anything. Here in management or in monitoring, I won't have anything in advanced either. And here in tag, I'm going to add my environment tag. I'm going to add my environment tag. Then this machine doesn't have an audience. The only way for me to be able to connect right now, she is using the VPN. So I'm going to ask her to do the creation while she does. When deploying my VPN, I'm going to bring other documentation here, which is for you to enable the MFA, which is one of the critical points of our class using multi-factor authentication. We have two ways to enable MFA. Way one is to enable it via authentication, you're right. So, in order for me to enable MFA via authentication, I need to go to user accounts and enable the MFA setting, for example. If I wanted to enable a specific user, I'm here in the accounts. If your environment, there isn't one yet, this is the classic MFA that we would say I want to enable. Here, for example, by João Silva is Marco João Silva. I would come here to configure MFA by user. And then here on the MFA per user, oh, I have a user that he doesn't. You have the privilege here. Let me select here another user. Let me get that user here from Bruno Cardoso, for example. He's logging in with another user here. If my user here must be giving away some cash, but my user is a global administrator, I'm going to get an anonymous tab here, which is in the anonymous tab anyway. The user is okay. So if I wanted to enable Bruno Cardoso, I would bookmark him and ask to configure MFA. And here I can select that. I want to enable MFA for Bruno is obvious. Okay, guys, before you enable MFA, come here in service settings. And you're going to configure the way that you want the MFA to work. You can work with reliable networks so it doesn't keep asking for the MFA at all. Right now, internal networks. You can mark if you want to use, for example, text message, notification on the mobile app, code verification of the mobile app, and for how many days you want this authentication to work. So that's the way we would talk in a classic way. So the important point is, what license do I need for the MFA? Extremely important point. Here I have a table that I left in the description. And if you are working, for example, with a free account, you can enable it with fire security. Where is the Raphael fire circuit? You come here, don't come in from in the security part. Sorry guys, I passed security, not properties. Here, down here you have security T. So here it is with security on, security you can enable or disable. If default security is enabled, you can use MFA for free. To protect native domain accounts using only the app, that means what in my scenario, if I want to enable MFA for all users that are users, cloud, lieutenants users, I couldn't use a text message to Rafa by default. But I already did a laboratory. It worked okay, but we are saying the rule by the book. What does Microsoft require here if you are going to enable on the free account, right? Without when I tell free, that you don't have a license for one or two. If you are going to use it in the free format for administrators, then yes, it allows the mobile, allows text messaging, and also other types of control. Now, if you have licenses P1, P2, then you can use basically everything you need, including for applications, A, prime, and what we are also going to say about conditional access, right? So here it would be the first way to enable it is not the best way. Rafa, what is the way, let's say? So I'm not going to say it's correct, okay, guys, because it's not wrong. But the best way, we have a few places we can go. I'm going to get it here, and I'm going to connect. I'm going to wait for my machine to finish here. The deployment of my machine ended the deployment of my machine. So now that my VM has deployed it, I'm going to get her private IP. I'm going to try to ping VM first. It's very likely that the ping won't work because she must be enabled. Add. Then type ping here. Ask him to paste. Wait a minute, it broke. It's time for me to paste a ping 10.0.0.4. It's probably not going to be able to ping because the VM Lighthouse is enabled. But what really interests us is being able to connect via MSTSC. Then I'm going to type 10.0.0.4, 0.0.4. And let's see if it will work. Look, just called the connection. I'm going to ask me to authenticate with my admin user admin. Point Raphael. Okay. Look at my VM live and me. I'm going to close the connection. And look, just people connected. So in my VM through my notebook, it's VM without public IP. So here we close the connection. Is the first step we wanted. VPN is working. But in the scenario that I gave you to guarantee a security, right? The main point is to close that first loophole so that it's not just someone with a leaked credential who will be able to access your environment, is to use the double factor authentication. So I'll just wait for our machine to complete here. The access, and then we will leave for the MFA. I already showed you the first way, the classic MFA, but what do I want to show you? It's MFA via conditional access, which is the best implementation scenario. So here we are in our VM. I'm going to do the following. I'm even going to disable her firewall so I can test the ping through my notebook, okay? I'm not saying it's for you to disable firewall in your production environment. Far from that. It's just for us to do it. Do a connectivity test here. Dodge. Save it, load the console here, and I'm going to take a turn off here. On Windows Defender, on the fire part, now I'm going back here, and I'm going to try to ping again. Ping, it worked. So our VPN connected. I'm going to get my VPN client and I'm going to disconnect it. From the format that we configured, any user here of our domain would be able to connect. I tested it with my user Raphael, but I could get any other user. For an example, here is Bruno Cardoso. I'm going to get the VPN here. Let me see it here in the configuration. So clear the saved account before I'm going to disconnect. Disconnected, clear, saved account. He's not going to return anything to us, and now I'm going to ask him to connect again. Then he asks for the user. I will select the user here below. And here I'm going to pass Bruno's username. And then I'm going to try to connect. He asked for Bruno's information, asking him to provide information from the user's profile, basic profile, okay? So it's just so he can register who's authenticating, what he gave. Here for me, there was an authentication problem reading a profile. This is normal here, okay guys? This can happen here depending on which user you are authenticating. I'm going to ask him to come here again and he'll probably stop by. Sometimes when we change the user, we ask to delete the profile or even the first time the user is logging in. This is an error that can happen. I will ask him to log in here again. He will ask to register my device. Okay, so that's what happens every time the user logs in for the first time. It may give that error because it requires you to register your device. What is to register? It goes inside the Entra ID and it will basically annotate the device. What am I using to connect? It must have control of who is accessing the environment. And now I'm logging in with Bruno's user. He's going to show them all down here the characteristics of our connection. But I am accessing with the Bruno user. What it may attract your attention is that I didn't give anyone permission to log into the VPN. I didn't give any permission. You can come here on Microsoft Android for us to validate weird enterprise application. And here in the VPN client, you can see that we will have the properties of the VPN client. First, it will ask if it is suitable for users to log in. This here by default comes like this, and it means that users can authenticate. And the second point is because I didn't need to grant permission to anyone. And that part here, assignment required. He's like, no. What does that mean? That I'm not asking for permission to be released to the user. Since it comes like this by default, and this could be a risk to your safety, it will let any of your lieutenant's users authenticate. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to say that, who are the users who are going to authenticate? I'm going to click Save. In my VPN, I'm going to give it a disconnect. I'm going to ask it to disconnect. And then when I'm going, where do I add the users? Here, after you configured assign user and groups, it already brought some here users who have already connected. I will remove the user from Bruno. I will remove it in an environment productive. The ideal is for you to access groups, right? The site's VPN point access group and add the user to that group so that it works as a group. I'll get my other one guide here between. You need to have a license for 2, right? It could be a trial license. If you're going to take it, you get each lieutenant once, right? To test a P2 license for 30 days. Then you will only be able to add groups here if you have a P2 license. Then I added that you adjusted the permission that only Raphael, my 2 users here, will be able to, and Bruno is not listed. Let's try to connect again with Bruno's user. I'm asking him here to try to close the connection. I'm going to ask him to disconnect and clear the credential, okay? Because it's normal to keep that cache. You saw that it was automatically logged in, okay? So VPN cache is something that is quite a lot. It sticks a lot in this scenario. Then I selected Bruno's user, and then I'm going to ask him to authenticate again. And now he made a mistake, okay? And then he's saying just that. Let me pick it up here and zoom in. It's saying here that the user, right, called Bruno Cardozo is blocked because he wasn't directed, right, automatically, or he's in a group that provides access. All right, so what am I going to do? I'm going to close it here. I'm going to try to connect again. I'm going to select Raphael's user. I asked him to connect. Then Raphael's user went, beauty. So that's the first point. I'm going to take a disconnect. I'll ask him to clean up here, the account, say, and now we're going to actually configure the MFA, and I'm going to use the second option, which the second option is a conditional access. The requirement, he says, is that to configure the conditional access, you have a P1 and the 2. But Rafa, what is the difference? What is the advantage of conditional access for the format? When we enabled that MFA in the standard format we had shown here, there don't enter. Let me get my other tab that was missing. The cache here in the anonymous tab. When are we going to enable this user? Let me just bring my other tab here. I took any user here and went to enable it, as I had shown you. This enable MFA, it will work for everything, for any type of connectivity cloud that you are going to access. I am empowering my daughter directly. If I'm going to access 3.5, if I'm going to access the Azure portal, any item that calls for authentication on Android, he will apply for the MFA. The difference from the conditional is how the name already says it is a. If we are direct, for example, here on the VPN, let me take it here for VNG, is there on. What if I have a VPN, for example, my VPN from the site? In a bit, I have other VPNs that I can do it. Say that I want to enable this MFA exclusively based off for my VPN client. How do I set this up? in the same place, the place where we gave permission to the user. Then come here at Microsoft, come in, Enterprise Application, and here in VPN is the way shorter so you can get straight to the point. You can see that these screens will appear here. So it has here, for example, the option of conditional access here in item 3, and also there is a conditional option here in security. Rafa, can I go through the native console of conditional? Maybe I'll open it in a second tab here just so you can see the difference. Come in. Then in the security part, reminding you, we'll only use this conditional if you have P1, P2 activated. It won't let you create a policy if you don't. Here on the default screen, I can come, but I have to select which one is. Target resource, and then I'm going to have to select the app. I'm going to have to search the VPN app, for example. Okay, is a little more cumbersome. Azure VPN, it's here he is, right? If I go directly through the VPN's enterprise application, I click here on conditional access, it will already bring me a basically pre-configured policy. I click here on new policy, and it already has an app included. Look at the app it is bringing. There's the VPN app, and then I'm going to select an ideal group that you put in a group. Like I don't have a group here. I'm going to say that I want to add this MFA for a user, and I'm going to put Raphael's user here, for example. I'm going to select this user here, okay? So I selected the ideal user, or group is a group, not to stay so granularized. I selected the target, and down here in the grant, that is when it is that user or that group that tries to log into this application, what are you going to do? I will release access, and I'm going to require multi-factor authentication. You saw that my user, he doesn't have MFA enabled. I'm logging in all the time. He doesn't have one, and I'm not even registered MFA. This here is also a positive point when you enable conditional access. As much as your user doesn't have an MF configuration, it will force you. Register the MFA on time, change the policy here from report only to active. And I'm going to ask to create this policy. You have to put a title here, MFA trait, VPN point-to-site. And here I'm going to create this policy. I'm going to ask him to enable the policy conditionally. It is subject to the VPN app and to the users that I centralized. So there are two levels. You will enable the user who will be in the policy, and there in the app, I say who has the privilege to log in. Okay, let's go back to our client of VPNs. It's generally quick. It doesn't take long to apply the policy. I'm going to ask for him to log in. I will select my continue user here, and let's see if he will log in or if he's going to force me to enter the MFA. Since it has a cache, right, it may take a little while to deliver this configuration to me. So, the VPN client caches this just to simplify the user's life, but it may be that it will take a little while here for me precisely because it is cached. I'll wait here again. Yeah, it's connecting directly. You asked me for the MFA. So I'm going to wait a little bit here until it releases my cache for me, because otherwise he's going to keep asking here for me all the time. I'm going to do it until the next one. I'm going to enable another user that I didn't use, because then he'll force me to use. I selected only the Raphael user. I'm going to use this second tab here, or rather this first tab. I'm going to come here on Entra Id, and I'm going to select another user who I can use João Silva as a test. For example, I will copy João Silva here first. Stop. I'm going to log in, and I'm going to go to the enterprise application, and I'm going to release João Silva to log in to use the VPN client. Then come here in groups, and I will add the user. João Silva, I selected him, and okay, he has the privilege of accessing the VPN client, but I also need it here in conditional access. I included it because I included it per user. So I'm going to specify the user. I'm going to select another user here, right? João Silva Raphael is already selected, and I will add. So now I have two users, and I'm going to ask to save. Okay, now I'll go back there in the VPN client. Let me clear my saved account here once again. I will ask to connect. I will use the other user to continue. And here I will pass, or João Silva, enter his password. Let's see if I remember the password. Look, guys, I crashed on the MFA screen. Asking for more information to be needed, my corporation and organization is asking. I don't have a way to get through this. I don't have a way to bypass. Okay, then either I use another account or I have to click on the next button. If I click in advance, what will he ask me? He will ask me for the data so that I can register my MFA, and then I'm going to use it. I'm going to use an app, for example, the authenticator from Microsoft. I'm going to do this here with you. I'll say, okay, I'll configure. There's the authenticator configured, and I'm going to add a new corporate account. I'm going to ask them to scan the QR code. It will read the QR code here, and it will already bring me user information. He read the QR code here. I tell him to move forward, and then he will ask for a notification. It popped up here on the screen for me, number 3. I'm going to give 1, and it will validate. Okay, validated. Successfully completed. It was registered. And now he's going to ask to increase it to register here. And I believe it will work. Our connection. Look, guys, connected, okay? Then our user is already logged in. Let's test the connectivity here. See if Joel's user is okay. Being 10.0.0.4. VPN connected to the user established through a VPN site of the site using there. The conditional access is important, people. For the conditional access, we have to have license P1 and P2. You can activate this once on your lieutenant on a trial basis without having to pay for it. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this content. Tell me if you already have a VPN in your environment, and if your VPN already exists. Are you using MFA? This is extremely important regardless of the VPN provider. What do you have? If it's a local VPN, you have to have a personal MFA. Like I said, one of the greatest risks and one of the greatest sources of possible attacks and invasions is the VPN without the MFA. If you like the content, comment here too what you found next, content that you want to see here on the channel. If you are not yet subscribed, click on the button which is down here and subscribe and activate notification, because every week there is a new content coming out here on the channel, and if you found the content cool, it will add to your daily life. I will see you next Thursday. A big hug. #BrokeCloud.